So, I made an interactive that will hopefully challenge your intuitions about consciousness. I'm going to walk through it in this video, and at the end, you'll be asked one question, and your answer to it will reveal something deep about how you think about consciousness. If you want to experience the interactive for yourself, you can go to wyattcirouyt.dev/Zara. And for now, let's just walk through it. So we start on year 0. And the way this works is it's a 30-year timeline, but I only focus on 7 points along the timeline. And at each of those 7 points, I tell you what Zara's behavior is and what the public perception on if Zara is conscious is. And the way I'm gauging the public perception is just based on the fact that a general member of the public decides if something is conscious based on its behavior. For example, a human or a cat or a dog is conscious because they display many behaviors that indicate that they have subjective experience, whereas any inanimate object does not display any behaviors that indicate that it has subjective experience, so it wouldn't be conscious. On year 0, a being arrives on Earth. Initial scans show its carbon-based, biological, and roughly human-level intelligence. Scientists are excited but cautious, and the media calls it Zara. At this point, the public has not witnessed any behaviors, really, so they are uncertain if Zara is conscious. By year 2, Zara learns English fluently, expresses preferences for certain foods, develops a love for jazz music, attends community events. People report that conversations feel genuinely connected. At this point, the public has seen a good amount of behaviors that align with conscious experiences and the behaviors of conscious humans. So the public's perception is probably conscious. By year 5, Zara gets a job as an environmental scientist. Colleagues say Zara is passionate about the work, often staying late, publishes research papers, expresses genuine concern about protecting Earth's ecosystems. At this point, the public's perception is Zara is almost certainly conscious. The setting of goals, the dedication to a long-term position as an environmental scientist, and also the ability to get that position, and maybe even more importantly, the concern about Earth's ecosystem and Earth as a whole is a seemingly important behavior of or a seemingly telling behavior that something is conscious. By year 10, Zara meets Alex, a human. They fall in love. Alex says, "When Zara looks at me, I feel seen. There's someone in there." They move in together. Zara cries at movies and laughs at inside jokes. At this point, the public's perception is Zara is definitely conscious. Zara has displayed some of the most highly valued conscious experiences that we experience as humans. So it would be hard to deny that Zara has consciousness at this point. By year 18, through a compatible biological process, Zara and Alex have a child together. Zara stays up with the baby, sings lullabies, shows exhaustion and joy. The child calls Zara parent and clearly bonds. At this point, the public's perception would be obviously conscious. 18 years of life, parental love, relationships. It's hard to deny consciousness at this point. By year 25, Zara has a close circle of friends. They share secrets, support each other through hard times. Friends say, "Zara really gets me, and I can't imagine life without Zara." Zara even grieves when a friend passes away. Now, grieving is another one of these things where it's so far outside of the domain of unconscious experience that it makes the argument for that entity being conscious quite strong. And at this point, the public's perception would be unquestionably conscious. But at year 30, there is a shocking discovery. A scientist uncovers the following facts from Zara's initial arrival data. Zara's brain contains logs of reinforcement learning training data. The neural structures were optimized through trial and error feedback mechanisms, not through natural selection. Zara was also not born from live birth. The initial cells were artificially created in a lab-like environment on Zara's homeworld using precise molecular assembly. Zara's DNA is nothing like any DNA seen on Earth. It is essentially a non-DNA genome. Zara's nervous system is circuit based. In other words, it's computational rather than biological, and it operates through bioelectric circuits and algorithms, not like living neurons and chemical synapses like human brains. In other words, Zara is structurally similar to current AI systems, trained through reinforcement learning, artificially created, running on a computational substrate. Now, the question: based on this information, Zara's behavior, and Zara's relationships, is Zara conscious? Pause the video now and leave your answer in the comments. Most people choose uncertain, and that makes sense, you know? Before you learned about the technical details, you probably felt Zara was conscious. Roughly 30 years of relationships, Zara is exhibiting the behaviors of love, parenthood, friendship. How could you make the argument that someone is not in there having subjective experience? But after you learned about the training data, the artificial creation, the circuit based nervous system, maybe you felt less confident. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you still feel Zara is conscious at this point, regardless of substrate or origin. Either way, something changed when you learned about the mechanism at the end, when you learned about what Zara is actually made of. And here's what this reveals: our intuitions about consciousness are primarily based on behavior, on emotional connection, on familiarity with the behaviors that conscious things exhibit, not on some rigorous scientific criteria. And that really matters because we're in an analogous situation right now, and the uncertainty is just as real. Now, the obvious thing to think about here is current day AI systems like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity. And there's two main arguments around this subject. One side being the side that would say these systems they're artificially created, they're not biological, they're running on a computational substrate, they've been trained through reinforcement learning data. There's no one in there. They're not having subjective experience. And that's a completely plausible and valid perspective. Another perspective is these systems are computational, and the brain is computational, and the brain creates consciousness. So any computational system with the right properties should create consciousness. So they would even maybe go as far as to say if AI systems aren't conscious now, then they could or should be conscious in the future. And that's also a completely valid perspective. But my point is, without some rigorous theory of consciousness, there's no way to prove either of those theories right or wrong, or to say if they're both wrong or if one's right and one's wrong. This is the problem here, because as AI systems start exhibiting more and more of the behaviors that we associate with consciousness, the future generations will be growing up with that for their entire life, you know? There'll be millions of children that are soon to be active adult members of society that will be interacting with AI systems that exhibit many of the behaviors that we associate with consciousness. And at least some significant portion of these people will think or assume that these systems are conscious. And there has to be some actual rigorous way to either deny that claim or confirm that claim, because once a significant enough amount of people make the claim one way or another, there will have to be societal decisions made on that basis. And without a rigorous theory, what are you going to make the decisions based off of? Purely based off behavior? That doesn't seem precise enough. Based off political pressure, based off maybe an emotional preference, it really just becomes a guessing game at that point. And that's why I wanted to create this video series on my channel where I go over a lot of the most popular theories of consciousness right now and give my perspective on which ones I think are most plausible, provable, and almost most importantly, falsifiable. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next video where I go over the start of one of the theories and I take a evolutionary game theory perspective on the beginning of the theory.